Welcome to my channel Tudos Learning. In this video we are going to learn about ink, its history and its various types of. We will also learn what are the effects of ink on health and environment. So let's get started. Ink is a gel or solution that contains at least one colorant such as a dye or pigment. Ink is used to color a surface to produce an image, text or design. Ink is used for drawing or writing with a pen, brush or quill. Ink can be complex medium composed of solvents, dyes, pigments, resins, lubricants, solubilizers, particulate matter, fluorescents, or other materials. Demand for traditional print media is shrinking. On the other hand, more and more printing inks are consumed for packaging. Next, we are going to learn about history of ink. Since when ink was used. Many ancient cultures have independently discovered and formulated inks for the purposes of writing and drawing. The knowledge of the inks, their recipes, and the techniques for their production comes from archaeological analysis or from written text itself. Earliest inks from all civilizations are believed to have been made with lamp black, a kind of soot, as this would have been easily collected as a byproduct of fire. Ink was used in ancient Egypt for writing and drawing on papyrus from at least the 26th century BC. Chinese inks may go back as far as 3 or maybe 4 millennia to the Chinese Neolithic period. Direct evidence for the earliest Chinese inks is around 256 BC in the end of the Warring States period and was produced from soot and animal glue. The best ink for drawing or painting on paper or silk are produced from the resin of the pine tree. India ink was first invented in China, though the materials were often traded from India, hence the name. The traditional Chinese method of making the ink was to grind a mixture of hide glue, carbon black, lamp black, and bone black pigment with a pestle and mortar, then pouring it into a ceramic dish to dry. To use the dry mixture, a wet brush would be applied with it until it reliquefied. The manufacture of India ink was well established by the Kauai dynasty. Indian documents written in Kharosthi with ink have been unearthed in Chinese Turkestan. The practice of writing with ink and a sharp pointed needle was common in early South India. Several Buddhist and Jain sutras in India were compiled in ink. About 1600 years ago, a popular ink recipe was created and used for centuries. Iron salts such as ferrous sulfate were mixed with tannin from gallnuts and a thickener. When first put to paper, this ink is bluish black. Over time, it fades to a dull brown. About AD 800 to 1500, scribes in medieval Europe wrote principally on parchment and vellum. One 12th century ink recipe called for hawthorn branches to be cut in the spring and left to dry. Then the bark was pounded from the branches and soaked in water for 8 days. The water was boiled until it thickened and turned black. Wine was added during boiling and the ink was poured into special bags which was hung in the sun. Once dried, the mixture was mixed with wine and iron salt over a fire to make the final ink. The reservoir pen, which may have been the first fountain pen, dates back to 953. In the 15th century, a new type of ink had to be developed in Europe for the printing press by Johannes Gutenberg. Gutenberg's dye was inedible, oil based, and made from the soot of lamps mixed with varnish and egg white. Two types of ink were prevalent at the time, the Greek and the Roman writing ink. The 12th century ink composed of ferrous sulfate, gall, gum, and water. Neither of these handwriting inks could adhere to printing surfaces without creating blurs. Eventually, an oily varnish-like ink made of soot, turpentine, and walnut oil was created specifically for the printing press. This was for the history of ink. Now learn what are the different types of ink. Ink formulas vary but commonly involve two components, colorants and binders. Inks generally fall into four categories: aqueous, liquid, paste, and powder. Now, pigment inks are used more frequently than dyes. because they are more color fast, but they are also more expensive, less consistent in color, and have less of a color range than dyes. Pigments are solid, opaque particles suspended in ink to provide color. Pigment molecules typically link together in crystalline structures. Qualities such as hue, saturation, and lightness vary depending on the source and type of pigment. There is also dye-based inks. Dye-based inks are generally much stronger than pigment-based inks and can produce much more color of a given density per unit of mass. Because dyes are dissolved in the liquid phase, they have a tendency to soak into paper, potentially allowing the ink to bleed at the edges of an image. To circumvent this problem, dye-based inks are made with solvents that dry rapidly or are used with quick drying methods of printing. The advantage of dye-based ink is that the dye molecules can interact with other ink ingredients. Dye-based inks can be used for anti-counterfeit purposes and can be found in some gel inks, fountain pen inks, and inks used for paper currency. Dye-based inks are not affected by water, alcohol, and other solvents. Now let's see what are the health and environmental issues related with ink. Once ingested ink can be hazardous to one's health. Though ink does not easily cause death, repeated skin contact or ingestion can cause effects such as severe headaches, skin irritation, or nervous system damage. These effects can be caused by solvents or pigment ingredients. Ink uses of non-renewable oils and metals which has a negative impact on the environment. There is also a type of indelible ink. What is indelible ink? Indelible means unremovable. Some types of indelible ink have a very short life because of the quickly evaporating solvents used. India, Mexico, Indonesia, Malaysia, and other developing countries have used indelible ink in the form of electoral stain to prevent electoral fraud. This is it for today's video. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, please like, share, and comment. If you are new to my channel, please subscribe.